All right, let's talk about learning. We're going to crack the code on how to do it faster and maybe even better. And here's the thing, it has nothing to do with being smarter. It's all about knowing how to actually use the amazing brain you've already got.
You totally know this feeling, right? You're trying to learn something new. Maybe it's a really complex idea at work or a new skill, and you just hit a wall. It feels like your brain's hard drive has zero space left. It happens to everyone. But what if I told you there's a way to manage that feeling?
Well, for decades, researchers have been obsessed with this exact problem. And it turns out they've basically written a user manual for our brains. Or more accurately, two of them. Two incredibly powerful models for understanding how we learn. So, we're going to look at this as two different games you have to master. First, there's the inside game. That's all about what's happening inside your own head, managing your brain's very limited memory. Then, you've got the outside game. This one's about using the power of other people to help you learn. And here's the secret. To become a truly amazing learner, you got to get good at both.
Okay, so let's jump right into the inside game. This whole idea comes from a powerful theory in cognitive science called cognitive load theory, and its core message is actually super simple. You have to respect your brain's limits.
So think about it like this. Your working memory, the part of your brain that's actively thinking, is like a tiny little workbench. You can only hold a few items on it at a time before things start falling off. Cognitive load theory just says that any good teaching, or any good learning, has to make sure that workbench doesn't get so cluttered that you can't build anything new. So what does overloading that workbench look like? Well, picture a classic, terrible PowerPoint slide from a medical lecture. It's got dozens of labels all pointing to a diagram, text boxes everywhere, you don't even know where to look first. That kind of mess creates what scientists call high extraneous load. It's basically cognitive junk mail. It's noise that distracts you from the actual lesson. So what's the better way? You manage the load. Instead of throwing everything at someone at once, you start simple. You show a clean image. Then you highlight just one key thing. Say, the glomerulus in a diagram of the kidney. Once that makes sense, then you add the next piece of the puzzle. You build up the complexity layer by layer. You're working with the brain's limits, not fighting against them. Now, if we want to get just a little more specific, there are three types of this load. You've got intrinsic load, which is just how hard the topic is naturally. Then there's extraneous load. That's the junk mail we just talked about, the stuff that comes from bad design. And finally, there's germane load. That's the good stuff. That's the mental effort you actually use to understand and build real, lasting memories. So the goal is always to minimize the junk, the extraneous load, to free up all that precious mental energy for the good stuff. And this idea applies to everything. Think about learning CPR. You would never just tell someone, okay, figure it out, save this dummy. No. First, you show them exactly how it's done, from start to finish. That's a worked example. It takes away all the guesswork, it reduces that extraneous load, so the student can focus all their brain power on actually learning the right technique. Okay, so managing what's inside your head is absolutely crucial. But it's only half the story. Now we need to look outward. It's time to play the outside game, which is all about the idea that learning is, fundamentally, a team sport. This whole perspective comes from an amazing psychologist named Vygotsky, and his big idea, called social constructivism, is that we don't just soak up facts like a sponge all alone. We actively build our understanding of the world by talking, by arguing, by collaborating with other people. Vygotsky gave us this brilliant concept called the zone of proximal development, or ZPD. Just think of it as the learning sweet spot. It's that perfect zone where a task is a little too hard for you to do on your own, but you can do it with a little bit of help. That zone is where all the best learning happens. So how do you learn inside that zone? You use something called scaffolding, and it's just like the scaffolding on a building. It's temporary support. It could be a hint from a teacher, a question from a friend, or a quick demonstration. It's just enough support to help you achieve something you couldn't do alone. And then, once you've got it, the scaffolding comes down. And who provides the scaffolding? Well, that would be a more knowledgeable other, or an MKO. This is such a simple but really cool idea. An MKO doesn't have to be a professor with 3 PhDs. It could be anyone who knows more about that specific thing than you do in that moment. It could be your boss, a friend, a YouTuber, or even a classmate who just happens to get it. And this really is the core idea that changes everything. It's a huge shift. It means learning isn't just something that happens quietly inside your school. It's something that happens between people first. We build knowledge together. And you can see how this totally flips the script on what a teacher is supposed to do, right? Their job isn't just to be a transmitter of facts, standing at the front of a room and talking. Instead, their role becomes something more like a guide, a facilitator, someone who creates an amazing environment where students can discover and build knowledge together. So now we've got these two big ideas. One is all about the individual brain and its limits. The other is all about the power of the group. So the million-dollar question is, how on earth do they fit together?
Well, here's the beautiful part. They don't conflict at all. In fact, they are perfectly complementary. The absolute best learning happens when you combine them. They're really just two sides of the very same coin.
This chart lays it out perfectly. Look, on one hand, you play the inside game. You use cognitive load theory to strip away all the junk and present information clearly so the brain can process it efficiently. But at the exact same time, you play the outside game. You use Vygotsky's ideas to create a social space where people can talk about that information, work together, and build a much deeper understanding than they ever could alone. So here it is, the big synthesis. The real secret to powerful learning isn't picking one theory over the other. It's about skillfully managing that inside game of cognitive load inside of a really powerful outside game of social learning. You clear the clutter in your head so you have the mental space to build big ideas with other people.
And that leaves us with a final question for you to think about. Pick one thing you're trying to learn right now, or maybe something you're trying to teach someone else. How could you redesign that experience to win both games? How can you clean up the presentation to make it simpler? And how can you bring other people into the process? Because mastering that combination, well, that's the real secret to learning faster and deeper.